UFC 279, Nate Diaz chokes out Tony Ferguson. Khamzat Chimaev takes out Kevin Holland, and a bunch of other great fights throughout the card in Vegas tonight. It was Nate Diaz's night, and he took out Tony Ferguson, like I said at the top of the show, at the top of this podcast, took him out in the fourth round by way of submission, choked him out. And this is Tony Ferguson's, this was a great fight against Tony Ferguson. Nate Diaz, this is his night. The crowd was going crazy for Nate Diaz tonight. What a homecoming for him. What a way to have his final fight in the UFC. It seems like it's totally final that Nate Diaz is going to leave the UFC for a bit, and he is thinking that he's going to come back and take on the division again, take on the UFC again. He mentioned in his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan that him and the UFC have had some tough times. They've gone back and forth a bunch of times, and it hasn't been an amazing relationship, but he loves the UFC. He knows that it's one of the top organizations in the world. He knows that the best fighters fight in the UFC. And for Nate Diaz to pull that win out at UFC 279, where honestly at one point it looked like Tony Ferguson was going to really spoil the show for Nate Diaz, who was originally supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev, who took out Kevin Holland, who I also mentioned at the top of the podcast. This fight was perfect for both of these guys, for everyone. We're going to talk about Li Jingliang versus Daniel Rodriguez later on. That might be one where Li seemed like he got the short straw out of all of these mixes and matches that happened. But at the end of the day, it looks like UFC 279 was a great success. The fights that got swapped, the changes that happened throughout the card, it looks like everything happened for a reason. Nate Diaz takes on Tony Ferguson, who many, including myself, have been surprised why this fight hasn't happened yet. Nate Diaz was calling for this fight a long time ago. It never happened. The UFC denied it. They really wanted him to fight Khamzat Chimaev, and look at how it played out. Nate Diaz gets the win, the submission win against Tony Ferguson, and could you imagine? While I was watching this fight, it seemed like the only thing I could think of is that all 6 of these fighters were planning to fight someone else. And on almost a day's notice, they had to switch opponents. And for fighters like Nate Diaz and Khamzat Chimaev, and Nate Diaz especially, it seemed like Tony Ferguson was the perfect match for him. It was the perfect fight for him. And at the end of it, he did mention that he was training his wrestling throughout the camp and wasn't expecting it to stand up war like he had, but it worked out perfectly for Nate Diaz. And in Nate Diaz fashion, he's leaving the UFC and starting his boxing career. And it seems like he's going to fight either the winner of Jake Paul. Actually, he just might fight Jake Paul. It might not even be the winner of Anderson Silva versus Jake Paul. It might just be Jake Paul, no matter what. And this is what a perfect Diaz ending to this fight. Looked like at one point he was losing the fight. Tony Ferguson was hammering those leg kicks. At one point, Diaz, took a break, and it's just it was funny because Tony Ferguson's corner was calling for a takedown throughout the fight. They're pleading him to go for a takedown at one point. And then one time he shoots his shot, 1 for 1, Nate Diaz goes for that guillotine. And he could have just pressed the action with that leg kick. That outside leg kick that he was throwing against Nate Diaz. It seemed like it was working throughout the whole fight. And the one time he goes for that shot against Nate Diaz, he gets choked out. The one and only time. Like I said, Nate Diaz finish to UFC 279. And the man that he was supposed to face, Nate Diaz originally, Khamzat Chimaev, who we talked about in the pre-fight podcast, pre-pay-per-view podcast, comes in overweight by almost 8 pounds. Total villain heel move, and starts screaming at the crowd at the weigh-ins after the fight against Kevin Holland, who seemed like he was ready for the moment. He looked great coming into the octagon. He looked like he was really ready to take on the challenge of Khamzat Chimaev. And for Khamzat to go into this fight and to take out Kevin Holland so quickly, it just showed that the rankings reign true in this matchup. Khamzat Chimaev goes in and immediately goes for a takedown. Kevin Holland looks like he wants to, shake his hands and, dap up Khamzat Chimaev. And he goes for a quick takedown right away. And in 2 minutes and 13 seconds, takes out Kevin Holland. Currently, I'm watching the post-fight press conference that the UFC is putting on right now, and I would love to hear. Dana White is on, is on the podium currently, and I'm gonna try and listen to it every once in a while. But honestly, I would love to hear what he's thinking right now, because you got a guy in Khamzat Chimaev who, perfectly is going for that villain role in the UFC in the 170 and 185 pound division. And he's got this stigma behind him as well. Like, he can't make weight at 170. Do you just push him to 185 and make sure that this kind of mess never happens again? And do you put him at the main event spot in a pay-per-view now? Can you trust him? You can trust him to put on a great fight, but what happened in this, where they had to shuffle all of this, you can't do this too many times. Meaning, you can't plan every single time Khamzat Chimaev fights that you have an opponent for himself and his opponent. That's the thing now, and for him to really, push for this villain role in the UFC, I think it's perfect for him. The way that he's taking over the division, Daniel Cormier at the end of that fight mentioning that this is a future champion. Wins will, you'll forget about a lot of things when fighters are winning. With Khamzat Chimaev, when he keeps on winning and winning and winning, you're going to forget a lot of things. And again, when we were talking about Nate Diaz, I was also thinking about Khamzat Chimaev and how he rolled through Kevin Holland, who's a bigger guy, has a longer reach than Khamzat Chimaev. And for Khamzat to roll through Kevin Holland like that, like butter, what would he have done to Nate Diaz? Who, mind you, when I talk about all of these fighters, these 6 fighters at the top of the card, I'm still thinking that, of course they trained for someone else. They trained for another fighter. And for them to go in and fight someone else, it is a super tough ask. And kudos to all of them. Kudos to the UFC. Kudos to all of these fighters. But for all of them to go in and fight someone else, and Kevin Holland apparently went to the commentators right away and apologized for what happened. There's no need for an apology. He was not supposed to fight a wrestler like this. He was supposed to fight D-Rod, who's primarily a boxer. And for him to get submitted like this, and for any of these fighters, Tony Ferguson included, Li Jingliang, all of these fighters that lost, there's, you can't really say much in terms of anything bad when it comes to these fighters. Kevin Holland, at one point, it just seemed like he, like a cannon was just put right in his face, and he was just scrambling throughout that whole fight. At one point, he did get full guard, and it looked like he was trying to control the situation, bring down the tempo of the fight. But for Khamzat Chimaev to just blow through him like that is just something special. And for him to have these medical issues and still do what he was doing, if he's telling the truth and he's saying that he couldn't have made the weight, then at the end of the day, for him to do what he did, and the doctor ordered him to stop, for him to be medically compromised and still do what he did to Kevin Holland is truly special. But I think it's perfect for him to do what he was doing. At some points, I didn't really understand what he was mentioning in the post-fight press conference. That's fine. For him to have that attitude is perfectly fine. As long as you get wins, you can't keep on coming in 8 pounds over and not get, the UFC is going to put you in that bad book. Everybody's been talking about Khabib Nurmagomedov and him not making weight and him having weight issues. Conor McGregor talked about it when initially getting the fight proposed against him. He just mentioned that he's not reliable. And will Khamzat Chimaev be reliable? We know he's reliable at 185. But he's mentioning that he wants to go back and forth and he could have made the weight and all this kind of stuff. It's not going to happen. Just stick to what you know is best. You've knocked out guys like Gerald Mershaw in one shot. You've taken out Li Jingliang, who looks so great against Daniel Rodriguez, and we'll talk about him right after. And to take on Kevin Holland, who has shown great jiu-jitsu, has shown great striking, taking out guys like Jacare from his back and having the reach advantage and all this kind of stuff, and just shooting out like a cannon, like I mentioned before. I'm just going to keep on saying that because it's the only thing that I can think of when it comes to this fight. Getting that submission right away, and the commentators were mentioning that he was blowing out his gas tank and all that kind of stuff, but he just knew. He could tell that he was just levels above Kevin Holland. And to take out Kevin Holland the way that he did was super special. But we'll see what happens when he gets up on this post-fight press conference that the UFC is putting on. We'll see what he says, what kind of remarks he has for the rest of the division. And what an interesting card UFC 279 was. Big drama. And another fight that had a lot of drama involved was the Li Jingliang and Daniel Rodriguez fight. Many people online mentioning that like Li had to go through so much, not being able to go up on the presser, not having a last minute opponent switch, and having a split decision loss to Daniel Rodriguez, who was boxing him up at some points, but you could, it seemed like the significant shots by the eye test was Lee was hitting him with a lot more significant shots. And to to lose a split decision loss like that is super tough. I'm gonna talk about more of the component of how much Lee put into this camp. Having his last fight and then sticking around in the U.S., missing his family for about a couple more months extra, and to stay in Vegas and take on Daniel Rodriguez, and to lose like that is super tough. I mean, he's got to take some time off and reflect on this. Again, there's, he was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson, who also includes a lot of elbows, spinning attacks, and unorthodox striking, and has great jiu-jitsu. And Daniel Rodriguez is not that guy. He's in a different weight division as well, and was supposed to fight Kevin Holland at around, I think they were supposed to fight at 185, and then Li Jingliang was supposed to fight at 170. They had a catchweight bout, Daniel Rodriguez and Li Jingliang, but for him to lose like this is super tough. And imagine him flying all the way back home and to meet his little girl, who he's mentioned multiple times in multiple interviews, and has really pulled at the heartstrings of MMA fans. And for him to go out in a split decision loss like this is super tough. Aldana getting a great win, KO in the third round, liver kick from the bottom. She says that she's trained that multiple times, and she trains it in the back, and she trains for everything. What an the crowd, when you go to events and someone gets knocked out like that, or something weird happens, sometimes there's fights breaking out in the crowd as well. There's a lot of other things that happen when you're sitting in the crowd that you don't really get the perspective of in the octagon. There might be something that the commentators are mentioning that you're just not seeing, and vice versa happens. I mean, in the Tony Ferguson Nate Diaz fight, the angle that the camera was at, you could not see the tap right away. Obviously, the referee, Mark Goddard, one of the best in the business, he's not going to do anything crazy, but you couldn't see it right away. You couldn't see Tony Ferguson tap like that. It's hard to even imagine Tony tapping. He's so mentally tough. But anyways, Aldana gets the win, a liver shot, from the bottom. And the commentators nailed it right away. But the crowd was not having it. They were booing, they were confused. Aldana was confused as well. Even though she trains this all the time, she was just confused. She didn't know what happened. Some people thought it was a low blow right away, and it was not. It was a liver kick. Johnny Walker gets the win, does the worm right after. I was scared for my life that he was going to bust his shoulder again while he was doing the worm, which is crazy. Getting the first round submission win against Cutelaba. Tough opponent. Looked a bit different out there. Wasn't going with that berserker style. Cutelaba was not going with that kind of style. Johnny Walker, composed, still looking to climb the light heavyweight division and get a championship eventually. Hakeem Adawadu, unanimous decision loss. Unfortunate for Canada. Again, another fighter that had weight issues coming into this fight. He was a couple pounds over. I think it was like 3 or 4 pounds over. And lost to the taller, he could really lean into his shots. Julian could, and got the win against a super technical striker in the featherweight division. Great win for him. And back to the drawing board, I guess, for Hakeem Dawodu. In multiple facets of the game, the weight cutting, the fighting, all that kind of stuff. The rest of the card was super fun. Chris Barnett getting that win. Jake coming into this fight thinking that it was going to be an easy win for him. And Barnett gets the KO win in the second round after he just goes nuts, sprawling, and then taking the back of Jake and raining bombs on him. His Barnett's eye was closed the whole time and got hit by some nasty shots. It's crazy. Comes in over the heavyweight limit and gets the win against Jake in this fight. Fun, always fun to watch Chris Barnett fight. And for him to get that KO win was special. But, you know, he's got to work on his weight cutting issues. I mean, like if he wants to thrive in the UFC. But great win for him, fan favorite. Everybody loved him. And, you know, great shout out to the crowd. Obviously, the crowd's going to love something like that. A couple other fights that I wanted to mention. Wolf losing, who's a big prospect, you know, 39 years old, but, you know, a boxer who could have made it to the Olympics. Unfortunate situation with her in boxing. But losing to Norma, and this, you know, how crazy is it that Norma wanted to strike with a pro boxer, you know, with the career that Danielle Wolf has. The UFC really wanted her to thrive in this division. You could tell Wolf being the tallest in the UFC at 5'11", but I believe that there was another fighter on the card, Marcy, who was also 5'11". So I don't know about that. So we'll see what happens with Danielle Wolf. This loss, you know, puts her back. First loss in the UFC. She was in Dana White's Contender Series. The UFC really wanted to push her. They wanted to get fighters in this featherweight division. And for her to lose like that, you know, is unfortunate. But you could really tell that, you know, on the ground, there was a lot of stuff that she needed to work on. And even when it comes to MMA striking, there was a lot of stuff that, you know, she had to work on. So UFC 279, what a great card. A lot of drama in this one. Nate Diaz pulling out the win against Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, you know, great sport at the end of it. All of these fighters, these 6 fighters had to, you know, it was super tough for them to face a different opponent and to, you know, for this to happen is crazy. And Khamzat Chimaev just explodes and was the fan favorite at one point. Everybody loved this guy, and it seems like everybody is rooting for him to lose. He might be, you know, like I'm not going to say Floyd Mayweather in terms of career, but I'm saying Floyd Mayweather in terms of you always wanted to watch Floyd Mayweather lose if you were pulling against him. So he might totally pull that direction. He might be like a Kobe Covington. But the way that he's blowing through the division is insane. But Nate Diaz, the ultimate winner of UFC 279. So I really appreciate you guys listening. I thank you for taking the time and listening to this live stream. After these big pay-per-views, I do live streams. If you're listening on the different podcast networks, or if you're listening to this later on YouTube, I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. This has been a fun one. This has been a super fun card to talk about. So really appreciate it. Thank you again. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. If you can like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, that'll be awesome. And yeah, leave a comment below, all that good stuff. Give 5 stars on the different podcast networks. That'd be awesome. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Naz. Bye.